Hello folks, welcome to another edition of the Dr. Mark Foster Show. Today I will speak on another unusual topic. Bigfoot, sometimes called Sasquatch, Yeti, Abominable Snowman. That was actually the first name that I knew that creature by, based on a book that I read under that title when I was around 11 or 12 years old. Regardless, this being has been considered as a part of folklore for a long time. Controversial over whether the being actually exists. There have been some recent studies which have been done on him, and also some that are in the process of being done right now. I will discuss some of that and also offer my own very speculative views on what Bigfoot might be. First, there is an area which is called transgenics. Transgenics is taking genetic material from one species and putting it into another. That's transgenics. It is sometimes referred to as hybridization, but as I understand it, not as a professional geneticist or biologist, there is a technical difference between the two, and actually what is generally or commonly described as hybridization is actually transgenics. Regardless, at the present time, some people have argued that the planet Earth might actually be inhabited by other intelligent co-terrestrials, not trans-terrestrials or extraterrestrials or subterrestrials, but co-terrestrials, other intelligent human beings who have been here for varying amounts of time. In other words, intelligent, non-Homo sapien hominins. The word hominin, H-O-M-I-N-I-N, is the word that we normally refer to as human being. It would include, for example, both Homo sapiens and the now deceased or extinct Neanderthal subspecies of Homo sapien. The idea basically is that these species are alive right now, that we are not the only intelligent creature on the planet Earth. This is an excerpt from a blog, and I'll just read it. It's kind of intriguing. It was written back in 1938. The Yeti emerges as creatures of kindness and sympathy, according to one story. A captain claimed that, injured while traveling on his own in the Himalayas and threatened with slow blindness and exposure, he was saved from death by a 9-foot-tall creature resembling a prehistoric human which, after carrying him several miles to a cave, fed and nursed him until he was able to make his way back home. Again, these beings are known by various names. Bigfoot may be most common, Sasquatch, Yeti, Abominable Snowman, Almas. Some people have speculated that these beings are actually pre-Homo sapien species of man. For example, Dr. Myra Shackley, who is a professor of archaeology at Leicester University in the UK, believes or believed that Bigfoot is a pre-hominid Neanderthal man, which was a predecessor of modern man who supposedly was exterminated by Cro-Magnon men. Stan Booch has cited the research of Myra Shackley, and I'll read this, who tantalizingly suggests that the legendary Almas, which means wild men, of the Caucasus and Outer Mongolia may in fact represent relict Neanderthals, meaning surviving Neanderthals. In one famous account, a female Almas was captured in the 19th century. She was described as having skin of a grayish-black color, covered with reddish hair, longer on her head than elsewhere. She had a large face with big cheekbones, muzzle-like jaw, and large eyebrows, big white teeth, and a fierce expression. she sounds very much like a Neanderthal. First kept for some years in a stone enclosure, she later was kept in a cage and finally in a house. She learned to obey simple orders and used branches and stones as tools. She became pregnant by her captors, and while her first several infants died, she subsequently gave birth to 2 sons and 2 daughters, who in turn produced children of their own via mating with other humans. This is all in line with Gooch's hypotheses concerning Neanderthals. Note that the primitive state of the Almas may be because they are remnant populations who have degenerated from the Neanderthal prime of 50,000 or so years ago. Another story that is told about the same entity is that the reason why this being's first infants died was that she unintentionally killed them. Apparently, these beings are much stronger than we are. They can take much more harsh treatment, maybe scrubbing or bathing, and so unintentionally, because these were not pure Bigfoot, she unintentionally killed them. And so afterwards they made sure that as soon as she gave birth, they took custody of these infants and raised them. There are allegedly some people who are around today who are actually among her descendants. They do have some of her characteristics, supposedly, but they are, for the most part, look like modern Homo sapiens. There is a theory called intervention theory. I don't entirely accept it, but I don't discount it entirely either. I think that there may be some legitimacy to intervention theory. The basic idea is that the reason why there is life on Earth is that it was planted here by extraterrestrials or transterrestrials. In effect, that these beings from other planets literally seeded the planet Earth. That's what intervention theory is. And so according to this theory, Neanderthals are hominoids, which means bipedal primates, meaning primates who walk on 2 feet, the man-sized ones that dominate in Eastern Europe. The bottom line is that if it can be shown, according to one writer, that Neanderthals were hominoids, this means that they were and remain descendants of creatures that lived and have endured since the Miocene. The Miocene refers to a geological epoch about 23 to 5 million years ago. Now, in spite of that, there has been more recent research, as I mentioned at the beginning, which has been done on Bigfoot. The first of these projects has been somewhat controversial, mostly because the results were self-published. The writer was not able to get a peer-reviewed journal to publish it, so essentially she created her own journal, refers to it as peer-reviewed, but again, that's somewhat debatable by some people. And this is what Dr. Ketchum's research has found. By the way, she is a veterinarian and a veterinary researcher. 111 samples of blood, tissue, hair, and other types of specimens were studied, characterized, and hypothesized to be obtained from elusive hominins in North America, commonly referred to as Sasquatch. The totality of the DNA evidence suggests the Sasquatch nuclear DNA is a mosaic comprising human DNA interspersed with a sequence that is novel but primate in origin. All known ape and relic hominin species, such as Neanderthal, were excluded as being contributors to both nuclear and mitochondrial sequences. Though preliminary analysis supports the hybridization hypothesis, alternatively, it could also be hypothesized that the Sasquatch are human in origin, having been isolated in closed breeding populations for thousands of years. Nevertheless, the data conclusively proves that the Sasquatch exist as an extant hominin and are a direct maternal descendant of modern humans. another article about that same piece of research. A team of scientists can verify that their 5-year-long DNA study, currently under peer review, well, that's a bit outdated, it was under peer review, confirms the existence of a novel hominin hybrid species, commonly called Bigfoot or Sasquatch, living in North America. Researchers' extensive DNA sequencing suggests that the legendary Sasquatch is a human relative that arose approximately 15,000 years ago as a hybrid cross of modern Homo sapiens with an unknown primate species. The study was conducted by a team of experts in genetics, forensics, imaging, and pathology, led by Dr. Melba S. Ketchum of Texas. In response to recent interest in the study, Dr. Ketchum can confirm that her team has sequenced 3 complete Sasquatch nuclear genomes and determined the species is a human hybrid. Our data indicate that the North American Sasquatch is a hybrid species, the result of males of an unknown hominin species crossing with female Homo sapiens. Genetically, the Sasquatch are a human hybrid with unambiguously modern human maternal ancestry. Governments at all levels must recognize them as an indigenous people, this is according to Dr. Ketchum, and immediately protect their human and constitutional rights against those who would see in their physical and cultural differences a license to hunt, trap, or kill them. Again, somewhat controversial, but a rather interesting idea. One other aspect of this is a transterrestrial and angelic one. As I have written elsewhere, when the term orbs is used, my understanding is that orbs are kind of like ghosts, auras, basically the energy, the energetic or psychic field that surrounds a human being, whether in this world or in the world to come. Those orbs, auras, psychic fields are, from a Baha'i perspective, as I understand it, not intended to be developed in this world. My own speculation is that in the next world, the orb or aura or psychic field will take on many of the functions that in this world we use the rational faculty or human spirit for. That's, again, only my own personal speculation. Regardless, this is an excerpt from several different sources which connect Bigfoot with orbs and with flying saucers or extraterrestrial spacecraft. Sally Shepard Wolford writes about her years living in a remote place in Washington with her young children, including Autumn, who was the youngest. Staying at home with her mother during the day, Sally, and eventually the entire family, encounter Bigfoot, along with many other high strangeness events, including UFOs and orbs of light. Impossible to know if these were the same kinds of light, or if the orbs in Sally Shepard Wolford's book have anything to do with Bigfoot. It is possible they do. It's possible the area is full of energy and caused these things to occur. There are many members of the community that have dedicated their lives to studying the elusive creatures known as Bigfoot. Through their day-to-day observations, many of them believe the creature to be almost mythical, to have almost mythical or magical powers, rather. The seeming ability to disappear into the air, among the most prominent traits they observe, sometimes even disappearing in a flash of light. And that last statement is a transition to the next part of this program, where I will talk about these beings who I think are perhaps, pardon me, who I think are perhaps under angelic protection, meaning being protected by departed souls, as well as by extraterrestrial or transterrestrial beings, and why they are around and why they were created by some type of transgenics. According to David Paulides, who is a Bigfoot researcher. Paulides has argued that Bigfoot might have advanced cognitive abilities. What he says is that some people who have encountered these beings have claimed that it was almost like they were being hypnotized by them, or as if they had a kind of telepathic communication. Perhaps, as has been speculated, they might have these abilities as a type of survival mechanism, in other words, to avoid being captured or tracked. Here is one story which is told by Paulides. The sheriff was getting a posse together to go out and hunt them, the Bigfoot. Well, these 3 different tribes of Native Americans got together and held a press conference and said, "Don't do this. These are people, like you and me. They may look different, but they think, they're smart. We even trade with them at times, and they have certain abilities that you and I don't have. They have the ability to mimic sounds. They have the ability of certain kinds of hypnosis." What every Native American group says is that these are people. They have their own tribe, their own group, they have their own trading scenarios, etc., etc. The Native Americans of certain tribes have said that the Bigfoot can sometimes speak to you in your mind. I've also heard that they have the ability to sometimes scramble themselves invisibly in some way. Many of the Bigfoot sightings are happening in areas with high humidity, Paulides continues. And using an elephant for a second, they communicate by way of infrasound. And that is the vibration of sound on a certain level. Well, we talked to an acoustic expert and a physicist, and we asked them, if you could scramble molecules of water to a point where they were moving so fast, could you blur an area in front of you to the point where someone couldn't tell what was behind that rapid movement of water molecules at small levels? And the physicist hesitated, and he said, "Wow, I've never heard that before, but I guess it would be possible." My guess is that this is something we had on a finer level thousands of years ago, and without using it all the time, we tend to lose it. But it's almost a sense that we don't understand right now. That is the end of the quotation from Paulides. Paulides then gives an account of a rather unusual case concerning a 3-year-old boy who was allegedly abducted by some type of being who I would speculate are Bigfoot, although Paulides himself does not say that. He is a Bigfoot researcher, but he's also a very careful person, and he tries very hard not to make any statements that he cannot support, which I really admire in him. This is his account, a very unusual account, and according to Paulides, this is the most specific account that he has of someone who was actually captured, or abducted, I suppose, by these beings, and has lived to talk about it. He gives this fellow the name of John Doe, obviously, to protect his identity, little kid. So he says, John Doe was with his family. This was on October 1st of 2010. About 6:30 p.m. he disappeared. This area of disappearance, Mount Shasta, California, has a very long history of strange things. I mean, people have said that there are people called Lemurians that live beneath Mount Shasta. There's been a history of Bigfoot sightings in this area. There's been tons of UFOs flying around Mount Shasta. Well, this boy disappears from his parents. They immediately call the sheriff. A big search starts. At about 11:30 at night, they find this boy sitting in the middle of a bush in the thicket. So finally, the next day, they get talking to him, and they say, "Well, explain what happened." And he goes, "I really don't know. I just kind of disappeared." "Well, where were you?" they asked. And he, meaning the 3-year-old boy, tells the story that he's taken into a cave, and he thinks that it's underground. and he says that he's with a woman that looks exactly like his grandmother. And in fact, originally he thought it was his grandmother, but he said that in the cave there are a lot of other things that look like people, but they are all robots, and they're motionless, they're not moving. And he says that after a while, he figures out that this woman isn't really his grandmother, even though she's really nice to him and very polite. But he believes that she's a robot as well. There was some light or sparks or unusual light coming from her head. She was really nice until she started to get pushy, and she took out some sticky paper and laid it on the ground and told him that he had to poop on it. Very odd story. And he told her that he didn't have to go. At that point, she got mad. He, the little kid, said that he saw a lot of small guns and things around the perimeter of the cave, and they all had a lot of dust on them. I'm speculating that perhaps they were guns that may have been captured from other people. Okay, Paulides continues. He, John Doe, tells the story to his real grandmother. Well, the grandmother told us, meaning Paulides and his team, that 3 weeks before the boy disappeared, the grandmother and her husband were at that exact creek or river spending the night. And they actually woke up in the middle of the night because the grandmother felt a pain on the base of the neck. And she had her husband look, and there was a small bloody spot at the base of the neck. And she said, "You know, I don't know if it's related, but I just wanted to tell you I thought that was strange. I happened to be there at the point where he disappears, and he sees this fake grandmother, and I have a bloody spot on the neck. I don't know what to think of it." Well, what Paulides thought, and his team, obviously they're speculating, was that the real grandmother had a DNA sample taken from her. My own speculation is that perhaps it might have been a kind of neural probing, getting some information from his brain, and trying to process information from his brain. Really unusual story. Okay, another account. This is from a fellow named Alan Lammers. He's talking about an account in Indonesia. He is a First Nations Canadian individual, although he lives or was living at the time in Indonesia. And this is the story, very unusual story as well. I was told not to bring any clothing or leather or yellow or any bright colors to wear in the jungle, only black and white. I had to ask why. And what he said is that, well, people who wore bright colors simply disappeared. He said that one of his friends, who didn't understand the warning, wore yellow clothing, and he didn't disappear, but he became very ill. And apparently the people in this tribal area were very surprised, actually, that he didn't disappear. He vomited very heavily, but eventually he became healthy again. He claimed, this person who had been captured or attacked, that he had been bitten on his right leg and then his thigh. He showed us the marks. They were huge scratches. He said that he could not see who was attacking him or what. The villagers stood around with these knowing looks, while we, referring to Lammers and his team, looked at the marks. Lammers says, I asked them what it was. They did not want to say, but they said he was very lucky. So that's another story, a rather unusual account, and it gets even stranger. Okay, Lammers continues. I found out he kept seeing what these people, these tribal people, call Jin Kurcaci, and I may be mispronouncing that, I'm sorry. It's looks like Jin Kurcaci. It means demon people. These things do what is called pen kalikan, and again that may be a mispronunciation. Apparently it's the word for abduction. No one knows why they do this, but sometimes the people come back after a bite. The people or creatures who do this have a small nose, and their eyes are small and black, but their mouths are very broad, and when they smile, it is very large compared to the rest of their face. He compared their smile to a Cheshire cat. He said he also saw some strange animals he couldn't recognize. The animals, he said, are the size of a horse, but they have huge antlers. He said that he saw herds of them. He couldn't understand where they came from, since there's not an animal like that indigenous to the area. So, based upon that, I think that what that illustrates is a type of hypnosis. I think that these entities have really, really powerful minds, and the ability to create some kind of an illusion, to make themselves look like other people, whatever, to create imagery, scenic imagery in the background. Now again, I'm just speculating, so obviously I have no way of knowing that, but this is as a result of reflecting on it. Here's another story. This story is going back to David Paulides. Many of the people that disappear, and I believe it's an unusual amount, have a disability. And many of those people with a disability have a speech disability that's in conjunction with that. So they can't really explain what happened. And many times it appears to be an autistic disability. Well, that really caught my attention, since I am an autistic. But many other times it's just age. A lot of the kids that disappear are so young that they can't tell what happened. And in the instances where they should be able to tell what happened, many times they say, "I can't remember." Many of the times it reminds me of the thought process that goes with someone who has been abducted. Initially they don't remember, but under hypnosis, their recollection comes back to them. Okay, he tells one story about a fellow named Keith Parkins. Apparently he disappeared back in 1952 from an area in eastern Oregon. He was 2 years old, and this is how Paulides explains it. To make a long story short, 19 hours after Keith disappeared, and 12 miles north, over 3 sets of mountains, countless fences, they found Keith laying in a dry creek bed unconscious. And he had a severe case of exposure. His clothes were ripped to shreds. Why were these searchers out for 12 miles, when the kid had been missing for less than 24 hours? That makes no sense. It's almost as though someone, somewhere, knew something unusual to be out that far. There's no way you could be more than 2 or 3 miles out in 24 hours, at the very maximum, with a kid under 10 years old in that kind of terrain. Then he talks about another case in the northern Cascades area, which is on the west coast of North America, where a mom and her son, he says, were picking berries in the woods. As they're picking the berries, he says, the mom is maybe 50 or 75 feet away. It's not in the line of sight of the son, but she hears a scream. The woman starts to run towards the direction of the scream, and the scream gets further away. And it's a more muffled scream the second time. She runs faster, and barely a third scream, but the kid is never found. Then he says, fast forward 30 years. There's a boy that was in a camper in the same area, no more than 20 miles away from where the berry picker disappeared. This boy was in the back of the camper with his cat and his younger sister. The boy, again, was sleeping, and the parents were just walking through the woods, so they kept the camper in view at all times. They wanted to make sure they didn't get too far away. And this is in October 1973. His name was Jimmy Duffy. Again, he's 2 years old, and they walked behind this set of trees just momentarily, and they heard a scream. And they run from behind the trees, and they see the camper door open. They run as fast as they can, and they get up to the back of the door, and they look inside. The daughter is still asleep, and the cat is still asleep, and Jimmy is gone. He's never been found. The parents took polygraphs, and they were completely exonerated. And what's unnerving about it is not only they lost a lot of time on the case, but law enforcement, there's no way they understand that this has been going on right in that part of the Northern Cascades for 60, 70 years under the exact scenario I gave you. Paulides continues, you know, the one thing that we hit on a lot is that the places where these people disappear in the north, there's many bodies of water nearby. For whatever the relationship meant in other areas of disappearances, and this is going to sound strange, but in high elevation disappearances, boulder fields seem to play a predominant role when people disappear and are never found. And I can't quite explain the boulder field phenomenon other than that it exists. My own speculation, water. Well, water is very commonly used by hypnotists. I know because I've studied hypnosis. One way you can very easily get somebody hypnotized is by having them stare into a pool of water or to watch running water. Boulders. Well, boulders are large and they make a good way of hiding, perhaps performing some type of misdirection. So I think that from that perspective, most of those things might make sense. Now, in addition to that, other types of beings have been reported as well. Now, I have no idea about whether these beings are actual creatures or whether they're made up. Some of them could be hoaxes or scams. One example is the black-eyed children, which some people have reported, or black-eyed people in some cases, they're not children. They're described as having totally black eyes and walking up to people and asking them if they can walk into their home and saying, I need to come in. Very hypnotic way of talking. And allegedly, people who have let these people in have died in some cases. Other cases have gotten really ill. However, where people have refused to let them in, these kids have just gone away. Now again, I don't know if these are the same beings, but it's possible. Now, there is a legend of shape-shifting, which is connected with Bigfoot. And I think that that is based on a misinterpretation. Bigfoot are not shapeshifters, assuming they exist. I don't think they're shapeshifters. But because they are so good at creating illusion, hypnosis, whatever, they can create an image or an illusion of having shape-shifted. So I think that the shape-shifting is not real shape-shifting. It is some kind of an illusion, a way of creating camouflage, whatever. Let me read you a statement from a website called Oregon Bigfoot. It addresses this issue. On the fringes of Bigfoot research, paranormal theories abound. Some witnesses believe that they have documented trackways that simply stop, leading some to wonder if Bigfoot may be interdimensional, whatever that means, or have the ability to shapeshift into another form. Some witnesses have indicated that Bigfoot can turn into a rock, or a stump, or become invisible. It's unclear whether these reports are simply misidentifications of the creature's ability to camouflage themselves and their surroundings and hold very still. Native American stories of skinwalkers, which were shapeshifters, have been attributed to Sasquatch. So I think that is a very wise statement. I think that that is basically what it is. These are very intelligent creatures. They can camouflage themselves. They apparently do have some type of hypnotic ability. And again, my own speculation is that perhaps as a kind of backup, in case we human beings, ordinary human beings on this planet, really mess things up, really knock ourselves off, that these creatures, these Bigfoot creatures, were intelligently or intentionally developed through as a kind of transgenic process by certain trans-terrestrial beings as a way of saying, well, okay, if you people are gone, at least there will be some people who remain. That's my own understanding. Again, obviously it's very speculative, and I'm perfectly willing to admit I may be entirely wrong on that. Well, until next time, this is Dr. Mark Foster. Have a good one.